Another question here from Emily on Facebook.
How can minimalism help me create a balance between life and work, especially with regard to working from home?
Work-life balance conforms to work-life boundaries.
Good one, man. That was good.
We harmonized.
Yeah, we harmonized that. He's going for the trifecta. Me, you, and Mal. He'll get there one day.
Yeah, I do need that harmony in my life. What I noticed in my own life when I didn't have work-life balance, it's because I didn't have work-life boundaries. Now, balance is not really creative. You don't create balance in your life. What happens is you disturb your balance by not having boundaries, right? No one who has balance in their life is seeking work-life balance. It's always the opposite. When things fall out of homeostasis, when they fall out of balance, that's when we go looking for it. If you're riding a bike down the street and it starts getting real wobbly, that's the only time you start thinking about the balance is when you're out of balance. And that's because balance is not created. It is the natural state. And so the question is, how do I get back to my natural state? Well, the way we do that is we set up boundaries that are appropriate. And if you don't have appropriate boundaries and you don't stick to those boundaries, well, then what happens? You trample all over that balance. You fall out of balance and you start to feel that disease or that discontent or that dysfunction in your work-life balance.
Oh, absolutely.
I love when you talk about the work-life balance thing because it is so true. Like we unbalance ourselves and we think it's like, oh, well, we have to find that life balance. But it's like, no, we did this to ourselves. We can undo it. It makes me think how Jess Williams, who did our social media stuff, I mean, she had a kid. She came back to work for us and she was out of balance and like something had to give. And she called us up and she's like, hey, my life is out of balance. I can't do this anymore for you guys. I love you guys, but you know, I have to take care of my life and I have to become rebalanced. And I was so grateful that she was able to like take that step and like be able to like admit that to herself because I know she really liked her job. I know she really liked being on the team. It's really hard to give up. And you know, maybe you're in a situation where you do have some kind of work thing that's really throwing you out of balance. You may not need to just leave your job. And I'm not saying that Jess didn't need to do that, but I'm saying like in this situation, like don't just consider what Jess did, but there's a middle ground too. So I would ask myself, just like if I was riding down the street and my bike started to wobble. I'm like looking at this bike like, okay, what is making this thing wobble? Like what? So from your home, what is getting in the way? What is making your life wobble? And that will help you and guide you to setting up those boundaries in your life.
Yeah. Minimalism sets you free from the myth that hours worked equals value created. We have a culture of busyness and hustle. Push, push, push. Sleep only 2 hours a day. Get up at 2:30 in the morning. Work 80 hours a week. If you can find another 90, work 90 hours a week, 30 hours a day, even though it's mathematically impossible. Because if you really want it, you'd find a way to solve that equation. That's the complete opposite of efficiency. Efficiency is about saying, I will try to optimize for the things that make a difference in other people's lives. I will optimize for serving my customers. And one of the great things that going remote has done for a lot of people, it's helped them realize just how much work isn't happening for 40 hours a week or 8 hours a day. Most of the work that's happening that actually creates value for companies and organizations, it's happening like 2 to 3 hours out of those 8-hour work days. But why do we do it? Because it's performative. Because if someone sees you there for 8 hours looking busy, well, who's going to judge you, right? Especially if your results fall short. But people are starting to go home and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and they say, I want to go for a walk. And they look around and there's nobody to look at them and say, hey, you don't look like you're working. And so they sneak outside feeling real guilty about it the first time. I'm going for a walk at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And they go for a walk for 45 minutes and it's the best 45 minutes of their life. They come back home and then they crush it in 2 hours of work that they never would have accomplished in 8 hours. Why? Because they weren't performing. And when you're not performing and playing the theater game of work, you can actually get some real value created. Those type of things have everything to do with work-life balance because the more efficient you can get with your work, the more joy you can have at your home and the better the energy you're bringing to the people in your home.
I'd like to tell you about a privilege that I've cultivated over the last decade or so. And I didn't always enjoy the work that I did. There were bits and pieces that I enjoyed of it. But one of the best ways that I found balance in my own work life is to truly enjoy the work that I do, to be compelled by it so much that I'm able to devote myself to it. If you have a vocation or a creative endeavor that is so compelling that you want to devote yourself to it, you're donating your time to this thing, and you would do it even if it didn't pay you very well. Oh, what a recipe for work-life balance, because you don't feel out of balance, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're riding that bike and you might be going really, really fast. And there's a lot of wind, but still you feel balanced. Or you can take a leisurely ride on the bike as well and still feel balanced. But if you start to feel wobbly, well, that's a sign that something's out of balance here. What are the boundaries I want to establish? And I remember back in my corporate days, Ryan, you and I, we didn't have any boundaries. We were on call like doctors. We weren't saving anyone.
Yeah.
Except maybe someone's broken phone every now and then. Or,
Right.
I mean, I had a bunch of retail stores I was in charge of. And so in the middle of the night, I'd get calls, 1:30 a.m. Oh, your alarm's going off at the Florence, Kentucky store. Okay, what do I have to do now?
Right.
Do I have to get dressed and drive down to Kentucky? And sometimes the answer was yes, because I couldn't get anyone else to do it, right? And so constantly having no boundaries was a recipe for burnout. If you don't have boundaries, you will become burned out. If you want to avoid burnout, set up the appropriate boundaries. However, you don't want to set up so many boundaries that it's constricting. Also, if you just have boundaries for the sake of boundaries, I'm put a boundary here, a boundary, it'd be like putting walls in the middle of this room, a wall here, a wall there, a wall there. Now I can't go anywhere. I have too many boundaries. What are the appropriate boundaries that make me feel free and I can operate my freedom within those predetermined boundaries that I've set, not a boundary that someone else has set for me?
Yeah, and that burnout also leads to bitterness because the people that are judging you, evaluating you, and holding you accountable, they don't know all the ways you've compromised yourself in order to say yes to them. All they know is that you said yes. And when you tell someone you're going to be somewhere at a certain time, that you're going to do something, all they care about is, did you deliver on the promise? And they're going to take you to task if you fail to do it. And so if you burn yourself out and you negotiate your non-negotiables just to say a yes that you really can't fulfill and you really don't want to say, think ahead of time about that resentment you're going to feel when people take you to task for underperforming in those areas. Set yourself up for success. As cliche as that sound, I think about my manager at Applebee's who'd always say, set yourself up for success. I triggered myself. However, set yourself up for success by making the kinds of promises that you know you can deliver. Healthy boundaries keeps you from being bitter.
And if you give a promise that you're eager to deliver, even better. I can't wait to fulfill this commitment.
Yeah.
As opposed to, well, I'm doing it because I'm committed to it. Those are the types of commitment. One is like a deep down devotion. The other is a tether, right? And it all depends on your view and the story you tell yourself about that. But are you committing to the things that are a hell yes to you? Because if so, then you don't have to commit to it at all. You feel good about doing it.
Did you enjoy this standalone Patreon highlight? If so, you can listen to full episodes of the Minimalists private podcast available exclusively on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/theminimalists or click the link in the description. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free.